Hello viewers, welcome to an episode of Kerbal Space Program. Today I shall be imitating the Orion spacecraft, which goes on top of the Delta IV Heavy. Here's a picture of it if you don't know what it looks like. So for the Orion mock rocket, you're going to need a normal 3-man capsule. Next, go down and grab yourself a regular docking connector and an abort tower in case your rocket goes catastrophically wrong and you need to abort and save your Kerbals. Next, you're going to need one of the most important parts if you plan returning back to Kerbin. You're going to need parachutes for obvious reasons. After that, you're going to need to grab a decoupler so you can stage your rocket, and a fuel tank to go along with it. Next you're going to need an engine for that, and here I'm going to turn on the mass indicator so I can see where the centre of mass is. I'm going to put the RCS ports here so I can change the orientation of the spacecraft and it's not unbalanced. Next I'm going to hide some batteries and a couple of little RCS tanks underneath the rocket so it looks nice and neat and it doesn't show up on the outside. Now I'm going to grab another decoupler so we can stage the rocket even more. However, beforehand we're going to set up the action groups, so you can want to attach the abort tower and the decoupler to the abort, which is the backspace, then custom 01, which is your number 1 key. That will jettison the abort tower, which we don't need after we get into orbit. Now some solar panels so we can power the spacecraft in flight and don't run out of juice. Now time for the actual main part of the rocket, the big launch. So we're going to grab 2 of these big orange tanks, and now we're going to set up the actual staging mechanism for the rocket. As you know, the Delta IV has, or the Delta IV Heavy has, like the stages in the middle and the side are more or less the same, except the middle engine's powered down so it burns for longer. Now here I'm deciding whether to use the extended decouplers or the shorter ones. I chose the shorter ones as it looked kinda weird with the longer ones. Now I'm going to adjust the actual position of the tanks because it looked kinda weird having them so close to the rocket. I thought they were going to explode during launch. So that'll do. Now these are the main engines, these are the mainsail engines, very powerful, lovely. Now as you can see, I've lowered the middle one. On the actual launch of the Orion, or Delta IV Heavy, you can actually see that the middle one's actually lower power. But then they up that during the flight after they've ditched the other 2 rockets. Now here I'm adding some solid rockets so I can push these away during launch after we don't need them. And of course we need to make it aerodynamic, so sticking some nose cones on there. Now to make sure it doesn't all wobble about, I'm going to attach some struts. Otherwise the 2 external rockets will actually push inwards and blow the whole thing to pieces. Now something to hold it on the launch pad itself. Let's use 6 of these. Now here I'm going to reorder the actual spacecraft staging, so if you follow it like this, after you've played this game for a while you very quickly understand how everything goes together, so it becomes more or less second nature. Now I'm going to smarten the rocket up so it's like level with the ground and not 100 feet in the air because that looks kind of ridiculous. That'll do. Now it's time for launch. Right, Right, so we're going to turn the SAS on, but our engines up to max, and we have liftoff. Now I'm going to look down the actual rocket so I can make sure it's like in line and not curving off to one side, and it appears the rocket itself is doing good. Right, so you want to start tailing back your thrust as you get to 300 meters a second if you're below 12,000 meters, because any faster and you'll start experiencing drag, a lot of drag. You'll see it. You see like the wind trail behind the rocket, and it's just not very efficient. So now we've passed 12,000 meters, you can begin to throttle back up your rocket. Now it's about roughly time to start pitching over. You want to do this very slowly at lower altitudes, as big rockets tend to flip over and they don't tend to right themselves, and you'll have a lovely mess of an explosion to deal with. So now I'm pitching over quite aggressively. 45 degrees is normally a good angle for beginners, but I know this rocket, I've flown it a fair few times, so I know that it's pretty good from here, seeing as I've got so much speed, 800 meters a second plus. So now we're approaching 51,000 meters, which is more or less the top of the atmosphere. So here you can ditch your launch tower, as it's no longer needed. And the external tanks can be jettisoned. And now we've got a lovely rocket blasting its way into orbit. So here I'm going to go for an orbit of about 200,000 meters. As you can see, I've got my marker pointed straight at the horizon, so I'm not wasting any fuel. And so that my orbit becomes more round, so then when I get to my apoapse, I don't have to burn for a very long time. I can just burn for a short while, and that'll finish that'll round off the orbit. Now I'm creating the maneuver node, so I know how much fuel I will need. And I'm going to even it out, so it's about 200,000. Okay, plus or minus 4,000, that's good enough, that'll do. Still plenty of fuel left in these tanks. This actually gets a very high orbit. So here it's about time we deploy the solar panels so we don't run out of juice. And time to align ourselves with our vector. Great. So now using the comma and period keys, you can speed up your time acceleration. Don't do too quick, otherwise you might go past your maneuver node. Right, so now I've more or less reached my node. Got about 30 seconds left, that's how I normally like to leave it. Gonna begin to throttle up the engines. Or engine. Right now, so I don't have any space junk in space. I normally like to let the lower stages burn up in the atmosphere, instead of using up all the fuel. This isn't very efficient at lower altitudes, but it's much better at higher ones. So here now, I'm just rounding out my orbit. Almost at 100, 200,000. Close. Nailed it. Perfect. So that's a guide for a mock-up Orion rocket. It does very well. I might try and get to the Mun one day and back. Probably not. Probably just there. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I shall be doing the re-entry and docking tutorials in the future, so stay tuned. Goodbye.